The following is a reading of the Executive Order number 12148. Federal Emergency Management. Source: the provisions of Executive Order 12148 of July 20th, 1979 appear at 44 FR 43239. 3. CFR 1979, Comp. Page 412, unless otherwise noted. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, including the Federal Civil Defense Act of 1950, as amended, 50 U.S.C. APP 2251 ETSEQ, and it continues to list a plethora of other acts and amendments in which more power has been delegated to the President, and in order to transfer emergency functions to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. Transfers or reassignments. Section 101. All functions vested in the President that have been delegated or assigned to the Defense Civil Preparedness Agency, Department of Defense, are transferred or reassigned to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Section 102. All functions vested in the President that have been delegated or assigned to the Federal Disaster Assistance Administration, Department of Housing and Urban Development, are transferred or reassigned to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, including any of those functions redelegated or reassigned to the Department of Commerce with respect to assistance to communities in the development of readiness plans for severe weather-related emergencies. Section 103. All functions vested in the President that have been delegated or assigned to the Federal Preparedness Agency, General Services Administration, are transferred or reassigned to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Section 104. All functions vested in the President by the Earthquake Hazards Reduction Act of 1977, 42 U.S.C. 7701 ETSEQ, including those functions performed by the Office of Science and Technology Policy, are delegated, transferred, or reassigned to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Section 1, Part 2. Transfer or reassignment of resources. Section 1201. The records, property, personnel, and positions, and unexpended balances of appropriations available or to be made available, which relate to the functions transferred, reassigned, or redelegated by this order, are hereby transferred to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Section 1202. The Director of the Office of Management and Budget shall make such determinations, issue such orders, and take all actions necessary or appropriate to effectuate the transfers or reassignments provided by this order, including the transfer of funds, records, property, and personnel. Section 2. Management of Emergency Planning and Assistance. Section 2, Part 1. General. Section 2101. The Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency shall establish federal policies for and coordinate all civil defense and civil emergency planning, management, mitigation, and assistance functions of executive agencies. Section 2102. The Director shall periodically review and evaluate the civil defense and civil emergency functions of the executive agencies in order to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of those functions. The Director shall recommend to the President alternative methods of providing federal planning, management, mitigation, and assistance. Section 2103. The Director shall be responsible for the coordination of efforts to promote dam safety, for the coordination of natural and nuclear disaster warning systems, and for the coordination of preparedness and planning to reduce the consequences of major terrorist incidents. Section 2104. The Director shall represent the President in working with state and local governments and private sector to stimulate vigorous participation in civil emergency preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery programs. Section 2105. The Director shall provide an annual report to the President for subsequent transmittal to the Congress of the functions of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The report shall assess the current overall state of effectiveness of federal civil defense and civil emergency functions, organizations, resources, and systems, and recommend measures to be taken to improve planning, management, assistance, and relief by all levels of government, the private sector, and volunteer organizations. Section 2, Part 2. Implementation. Section 201. In executing the functions under this order, the Director shall develop policies which provide that all civil defense and civil emergency functions, resources, and systems of executive agencies are a. Founded on the use of existing organizations, resources, and systems to the maximum extent practicable. b. Integrated effectively with organizations, resources, and programs of state and local governments, the private sector, and volunteer organizations. And c. Developed, tested, and utilized to prepare for, mitigate, respond to, and recover from the effects on the population of all forms of emergencies. Section 2202. Section 2202. Assignments of civil emergency functions shall, whenever possible, be based on extensions, under emergency conditions, of the regular missions of the executive agencies. Section 2203. For purposes of this order, quote, civil emergency, unquote, means any accidental, natural, man-caused, or wartime emergency or threat thereof, which causes or may cause substantial injury or harm to the population or substantial damage to or loss of property. Section 2204. In order that civil defense planning continues to be fully compatible with the nation's overall strategic policy, and in order to maintain an effective link between strategic nuclear planning and nuclear attack preparedness planning, the development of civil defense policies and programs by the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency shall be subject to oversight by the Secretary of Defense and the National Security Council. Section 2205. To the extent authorized by law and within available resources, the Secretary of Defense shall provide the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency with support for civil defense programs in the areas of program development and administration, technical support, research, communications, transportation, intelligence, and emergency operations. Section 2206. All executive agencies shall cooperate with and assist the Director in the performance of his functions. Section 2, Part 3. Transition Provisions. Section 2301. The functions which have been transferred, reassigned, or redelegated by Section 1 of this order are recodified and revised as set forth in this order at Section 4, and as provided by the amendments made at Section 5, to the provisions of other orders. Section 2302. Notwithstanding the revocations, revisions, codifications, and amendments made by this order, the Director may continue to perform the functions transferred to him by Section 1 of this order, except where they may otherwise be inconsistent with the provisions of this order. Section 3. Federal Emergency Management Council. Section 3, Part 1. Establishment of the Council. Section 3101. There is hereby established the Emergency Management Council. Section 3102. The Council shall be composed of the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, who shall be the Chairman, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and such others as the President may designate. Section 3, Part 2. Functions of the Council. Section 3201. The Council shall advise and assist the President in the oversight and direction of federal emergency programs and policies. Section 3202. The Council shall provide guidance to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the performance of functions vested in him. Section 3, Part 3, Administrative and General Provisions. Section 3.301. The heads of executive agencies shall cooperate with and assist the Council in the performance of its functions. Section 3.302. The Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency shall provide the Council with such administrative services and support as may be necessary or appropriate. Section 4. Delegations. Section 4, Part 1. Delegation of functions transferred to the President. Section 4.101. Revoked. Section 4 and Section 5 are mostly previous executive orders that delegated power to the President or organizations under the President, which were subsequently delegated to the Director of FEMA. In fact, almost all of the clauses end in the exact same sentence. For instance, Section 4's clauses all end with, "and they are hereby delegated to the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency." Whereas Section 5 lists powers that were once delegated to the President or organizations under the President, which were subsequently revoked. With that, I will end this reading. I have taken the time to read this as I have found it strange that in a country where the law is not made apparent to even those with eyes to see it, it is even more opaque to those who are blind, as I am sure that access to a braille form of this lengthy document is hard to come by. And even if they did, they'd be hard-pressed to find the time to actually sit down and read it. So in the interests of education, I am posting this for free and urge anyone who finds this law as disturbing as I do to share it with your friends and family who are either unable to read or simply refuse to read this law. This is law, ladies and gentlemen, and it stipulates that in the event of any emergency, the powers over much of our government's mechanics and machinery are transferred into the hands of a tiny group of people. We have a long list of these types of things happening and ending terribly for people who subjugate themselves to the will of tyrants. A country of people ignorant to the law will always fall prey to predatory legislators. If you have any other executive orders you'd like me to read or any other legal documents, leave them in the comments section below. After a review of the most requested, I will set out to record it. I thank you for your time, and remember, in the age of information, ignorance is a choice.